My friend's husband used to be a Navy SEAL, one of the strongest men I've ever met, incredibly smart and completely addicted to adrenaline. There was no assignment in the world too dangerous for him, no sea in which he would not leap, no danger into which he would not run, no locale too exotic or frightening or remote. Though the combination of his wife's pleading and the Navy's regulations eventually pulled him away from active SEAL duty, he could never quench his thirst for danger or for meaning. So now in middle age, he is as old as I and not in a nursing home. Imagine that. He works for the Air Force Survival School in Spokane, Washington, training young, brave, fearless women and men to do exactly what the name of the school implies. He teaches them to survive torture, extreme weather, mental anguish, isolation, deprivation, and degradation of every kind. His world is very dark, and he is the happiest man you will ever meet. Years ago, he confided and said, "Please don't tell my wife," which of course I did immediately. He confided that his deepest desire is to die in a dramatic fashion. This is no maudlin death wish, but a need for his life and his death to have made a difference. Knowing that we all must die, and most of us don't get to choose, but if we could, he would choose to die fearlessly for the sake of another. "I want to push someone from the path of a speeding train," he told me. "I want to take a bullet. I want to rescue a child from a burning building." Since childhood, he has wanted not to have his life taken from him. He wants to lay it down. He wants to give it away. To die of old age in a rocking chair would be to him a torture he could not survive. Today's readings take us back in time from where we have been most recently reading. Since Easter, our Sunday Gospels have been all about Jesus' post-resurrection. We peered into the empty tomb. We met doubting Thomas. Last week, Jesus ate fish to prove that he was not a ghost. But this morning, we return to the scene of the crime, to the events that led to Jesus' death and resurrection, and we find ourselves ankle deep in sheep. There are some jobs that don't change much over time. Sheep herding is one of those jobs. Unless you are descended from the Basques, for whom shepherding is a point of national pride, no one wants to be a shepherd. Shepherds live in virtual poverty, without shelter, in barren landscapes, often going months without speaking to another human being. Shepherds are stereotypically uneducated, isolated, and antisocial. When this morning's gospel reading opens, Jesus is defending himself from his arch enemies, the temple hierarchy. Jesus has recently restored sight to a man who was born blind, thus picking a fight with the Pharisees and the scribes, who would later amuse themselves by imagining ways to torture him. Addressing no one in particular and apropos of nothing, but knowing that the Pharisees were listening, Jesus announces, "Oh, by the way, I am the Good Shepherd." It probably seemed an odd statement since he was raised in the home of a carpenter and had demonstrated his intellectual abilities on numerous occasions. Sheep herding did not seem a likely career choice for Jesus. But more than being an odd choice, his statement was meant to be provocative. Good shepherd? Does that mean all the others are bad? I was going to say bad, but that would have been obvious. And the Good Shepherd? There's only one? But he went on. Turning to the eavesdropping Pharisees, he said, "The hired hand, who is not the shepherd, sees danger, cries, 'Wolf!' and runs away." Long silence. The Pharisees and scribes immediately understood where Jesus was headed. If he was the good shepherd of this narrative, they were the bad hired hands, and they hated him even more. But the final nail in the cross is this: the shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Each gospel writer tells the story of Jesus' suffering and death a bit differently. John's Jesus is fearless, purposeful, eager to get on with it. There is in John's gospel no anguish in the garden, no "take this cup from me." In John's gospel, Jesus steps in front of the moving train. Jesus takes the bullet. Jesus runs into the burning building. Jesus hoists the cross on his own shoulders and marches up the hill. Because Jesus knows that the shepherd's life matters only if the sheep live. Long after John's gospel was written, there was still a school of John, devotees who studied and expanded on his writing in the way we still do that with long-dead scientists or philosophers now. For example, we still study Keynesian economics and King's nonviolence, though both John Keynes and Martin Luther King Jr. are long dead. The School of John survives in the 3 brief books we have cleverly named 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. What aspect of John's Jesus did this school of thought cling to? We read it only a moment ago. We know love by this, that Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. Long silence. And we ought to lay down our lives for one another. After the resurrection, after Jesus had both laid his life down and picked it up again, we are called not to be shepherds like him, but to imitate the one who shepherds us, to love, as 1 John instructs, not only in word and speech, but in truth and action. Unlike my selfless seal friend, I have no desire to die dramatically. And I'm guessing most of you don't either. But for Jesus' disciples, there is a way for us to lay down our lives for the other without leaping into the lion's mouth. What would that look like? And do we really have the courage to do it? I recently heard a radio interview with country singer Jason Isbell. Anybody know Jason Isbell, drive-by truckers? Really? He was remembering a time when his life was being run and ruined by alcohol. He had tried everything imaginable to stop drinking, but simply couldn't do it. And one night, in desperation, he said to his wife, "I can't do this alone." So after he went to bed, she got on the phone. She called all the people he cared about, band members, his agent, high school friends, his elderly parents. She said to each of them, "Jason can't stop drinking without your support." He then told the interviewer, "I can't imagine the courage it took for her to do that, to admit to people, some of whom she had never met, that I needed their help. At 3 o'clock in the morning, she was calling strangers for help because she loved me." He's been dry for years. And though his wife is still very much alive, she laid down her life for him. abandoning her privacy, her pride, and lots of people prejudices, because if she had not, he would have died. Imagine now the person with whom you most struggle. Someone who hurt you badly. Someone whose life confounds you. Someone who abandoned you. And now imagine what it is that person needs most from you. Not the thing that would be best for them or the thing you would love to say to them, but the thing they need uniquely from you. You who are a sheep for whom another shepherd laid down his life. They probably don't need a good talking to. They probably don't need a self-help book. But maybe they need you to say, I forgive you. Maybe they need space of silence away from you. Maybe they need something that you cannot offer. And maybe they just need you to love them. Some smelly sheep, some sad soul, some shameless sinner needs you to lay down your life for them in a way that may make taking a bullet seem an easier thing to do. We know love by this. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. Jesus is the good shepherd. We are his sheep. And we are alive because he laid down his life. We are alive so that we can do the same for other sheep of his flock.